Welcome to Smalltalk Daily for Monday, December 29, 2008. This morning I'd like to go through a brief example of how to handle dealing with serialized objects, meaning BOSS, when you've saved objects out to disk and then you've changed the actual definition of the class that object is an instance of in the future. So let's take a look at that. Here I've got a blog post file from last July, so let's go ahead and inspect that. So I bossed that in, and you notice how I do that. I've gone through Smalltalk dailies on how to boss files in and out. So here's how to put the objects back into memory from the disk file. And here I have a Smalltalk Solutions daily promotion post, and then here I have a Smalltalk daily. So I've got two objects in there, and I can jump in and I can look at things like the blog text and the category, and I've got all of these things coming in just fine. Now, let's say I make a change. I come in here to my browser, and I look at these instance variables, and I decide there really ought to be a new instance variable. Now, I don't know what it should be, but let's say, we'll just call this foo. Not going to make it anything valuable. We'll just change the shape that way by adding an instance variable. And now what we'll do is we'll try bossing this in. And you notice that when I try that, I get this exception. Now, it doesn't look all that obvious as to what happened. It tells me a primitive has failed. But if I go ahead and look down here, it says it's trying to change the instance. Well, that's because when you save things out as a BOSS file, it actually puts everything into an array where each slot in the array is one of the instance variables. So if previously your object had, say, 6 instance variables, now it has 7, or now it has 5, it doesn't know how to reshuffle things. So what I need to do is I need to come over here to the class side. Now it turns out there's some protocol, and I've already got some protocol here. I'll go into this category, binary storage, and it turns out there's a number of things you have to do to handle this situation. Here I've got the current version of BOSS files. Well, this is 1.5 was the last one. I'll say 1.6. I'll just bump it up by 1. And then I have to come up to this binary reader block, and this is the code that tries to execute whenever it comes across a BOSS file that's an older version than what it sees in memory now. And you notice I just have a very simple little case statement type structure here. Not the most elegant thing, but it works. And I don't change it that often, so I'm not that motivated to go ahead and make it better. So here I'll say, well, if I come across 1.5, then run the 1.5 migration code, and it says it doesn't exist, but I'm going to write that in a moment. Now I'm going to come over here to my 1.4, and here is where the magic happens. I'm going to change this, and here's what's going on. It reads in the old object, and the old object is just an array. And here it used to be plus 1 for 1.4. It's still going to be plus 1 for 1.5 because 1.6 rather, because the new version only has one more instance variable than the old version. So this method can stand as is, and this is pretty much the way all of these kinds of methods are going to look. The difference is that you have to either add 1, 2, 3, whatever, or subtract based on whether your object got bigger or smaller in terms of instance variables. So I'll just accept this code. And then I need to go back to these other ones and adjust them as well. Well, from 1.4, it's a bounce up by 2, and I need to change it in these two places. So I do that, and then from 1.3, I need to change it this way. And this is going to be the same for all of these. Back for 1.2, I didn't hit accept. So I go back and verify, yep, go back to 1.2, change this to a 4, and then hit Control S, and then back to 1.1, and you can see this is going to be the same. I'm going to pause this while I go ahead and make the other changes. So now I've gone ahead and I've changed all these methods. Notice I've got this nil binary migration, and this is for the very oldest objects in my collection. So if I again go back to the binary reader block, that means that when I first defined this class, it didn't have a version. Now I could have been smart and given it a version to begin with, but I didn't. I didn't really anticipate this right off. So over time I had to add version numbers to this, and then here I said, well, if you don't come across a version number, assume it's the very first one, run this migration block. So now having done all of that, let's go back over here to my workspace, and we'll try inspecting this, and you see it comes in fine. And even though these objects don't have on disk that instance variable I added, they do have a slot for them. Here if I go down, you'll see that there's a slot foo, and by default it just throws a nil in there because it doesn't know what to do. But you can change the way that behaves, because what you can do is you can come into these migration blocks and you can put whatever code you want here. After you've done this change class to that of the instance, you can go ahead and say, well, that ought to be initialized to some value. So you can do whatever you need to do in this migration code. Not only do you just need to handle, well, it had 6 instance variables, now it has 8, you can initialize them any way you want. So that's pretty much it for today. We've gone through handling shape changes to objects when you serialize them out to disk, and that should get you started. Till next time, have fun with Smalltalk.